Hi there, and welcome to video lucky number 13 in the port series, my experiment to switch to privacy-respecting, open source, and responsible technology. As part of this experiment, I've now switched to Linux as my daily driver, and can happily say that I'm able to do 99% of the things I previously did on macOS or Windows. But 99% is not 100%, and there are still some rare times when I need Windows. In my case, I primarily need it when I'm recording screen captures at work or for this channel. In your case, it could be that one legacy business app that only runs on Windows, or that retro game that you still like to play. Whatever the reason, in today's video, I'll outline your options for getting Windows 11 apps and Windows 11 itself running on Linux. So stay tuned. Before you decide to install an entire other operating system on your device, you should take a look at the various options out there for running Windows applications and games on Linux directly. One shown here is Wine. Wine is not an emulator. It's a compatibility layer which allows many Windows applications or games to run on Linux directly. You can check the Wine application database, which shows the applications Wine has been tested with and rates how well they work on Linux, with workarounds suggested for many apps. Wine is a very long-running open source project, and the application database lists over 23,000 applications that have been tested with Wine. Now, if what you want to run is a game, then you're in luck. Proton, an application developed by Valve and based on Wine and other open source projects, is doing a fantastic job of getting Windows games to work on Linux. This is a fully supported project used by Valve in Steam and even the Steam Deck launched this year. The ProtonDB website lists games which have been tested on Proton and rates them as Platinum, Gold, Silver, and so on, so you'll know what to expect when running a game. Even if your game is not listed on the Proton database, there's still a pretty good chance it will run in some capacity, so if gaming is your thing, then you should definitely give Proton a look. On the other hand, if what's forcing you to use Windows is an application rather than a game, Crossover by Codeweavers is worth a shot. Crossover is also based on Wine, but focuses on applications rather than games. Here you can see, for example, the rating of Microsoft Office, which is rated 4 out of 5 stars by Codeweavers themselves. Now, I haven't tested this myself, although there is a free trial of Crossover where you can test your applications before committing to buy. Also notable is that Crossover runs on macOS, although application compatibility varies by platform. If Wine, Proton, and Crossover don't meet your needs, then that's where running full-blown Windows on Linux comes in. This might sound like a tall order, but actually even a mid-range laptop nowadays is capable of doing it. And provided you choose the right tools for the job, you can get near-native performance and even forward hardware attached to your computer to the virtual machine. So, let's take a look at the tools at our disposal. To run Windows on Linux, you need to create a virtual machine, or VM for short. You can think of this as a virtual computer within your computer, having a virtual CPU, virtual memory, virtual disk, and so on. Without getting into too much technical detail, there are two types of VM technologies, aptly named Type 1 and Type 2. A Type 2 hypervisor, as it's called, is an application that is installed on your computer, which then lets you create virtual machines. You may have heard of names like VMware Workstation, Oracle VirtualBox, Microsoft Virtual PC, Parallels Workstation, and others. These type of hypervisors sit on top of your existing operating system and provide software-emulated resources to the virtual machine, sometimes also able to rely on hardware acceleration. The problem with a Type 2 hypervisor is that it's heavier on your system, and every action performed on the VM must be translated into an instruction for your host operating system, which can significantly impact the performance of not just the virtual machine, but your system itself. Now, a Type 1 hypervisor, which is what I'll be using in this video, allows your VMs to run directly on your computer's hardware. This makes the hypervisor smaller and allows the guest and host systems to more efficiently share resources. The upshot of all this is that both systems can have better performance, but also that the guest system can be allowed to directly interact with your computer's hardware. Now, it's pretty obvious that we should be using a Type 1 hypervisor, right? And that's exactly what we're going to use. But now your question is, well, where do we get one of those? Well, chances are you already have one. Since 2007, Linux has included a Type 1 hypervisor right inside the kernel. And it's aptly called KVM, or Kernel-Based Virtual Machine. Coupled with some other software like QEMU, libvirt, and virt-manager, we can have an easy-to-use solution for creating virtual machines which run at near native speed and can use the system's hardware. So, let's get started. So here we are on my Linux desktop, and our first step is to download Windows 11. I'm just gonna type Windows 11 download into my search engine here. Download Windows 11. Link will be down in the video description. And what we want is this option here, download Windows 11 disk image ISO. We'll choose Windows 11 multi-edition, click download. We'll need to choose the language. I'm going to choose English. And we will do the 64-bit download. Okay, and so this will start downloading the Windows 11 ISO, which is a 5.18 gig download. So that could take a while depending on your internet connection. Now, once that downloads, you'll also need to make sure you have the appropriate software for running this VM. Now, I already have it installed, but depending on your version of Linux, you can get it installed easily from your software center, pop shop, app store, or whatever else you have. All you need to do is search for virt-manager, as I'm doing here, and you should get this option, Virtual Machine Manager. Now again, as I mentioned, in my case it's already installed, but simply clicking install here would install it, as well as anything else that is required in your for the virtualization to happen. So any kernel modules you'll need, QEMU, libvirt, and all that stuff. So it's really quite easy. Now, if this is not available in the App Store or Software Center, just search for your particular distribution of Linux and how to install it, okay? So for example, Ubuntu, install Virtual Machine Manager, and pretty much there we go, install KVM on Ubuntu 20.04 plus. So you'll be able to find instructions very easily. If you have problems, let me know down in the video comments. Okay, so in the meantime, you can see that the download of the Windows 11 ISO is almost done. And there we are, download complete. Okay, so now I'll open Virtual Machine Manager. And you'll notice here that I already actually have a Windows 11 VM, but I'm going to create a new one to show you guys the process. So I'm gonna click New here. And next we'll choose the install media. In this case, we'll say local install media. And here we need to choose the ISO we just downloaded. So I'm just gonna click browse, and I'm going to go to my downloads folder. And there we are, Windows 11 English x64 v1.iso. That's the file that I've just downloaded. Now, if your downloads folder isn't in this list, simply click the plus icon, give it a name, and then click browse and choose the folder you want to add. So for example, if I wanted to add my desktop, I'd click desktop here. I'd call this desktop, click finish, and now that desktop is there as well. Okay. All right, so I'll click choose volume. Now we'll need to choose the type of operating system. You'll notice it's detected as Windows 10. If I remove this automatic option, I can type something else. Okay, something like Windows 11, okay? But again, there's no specific settings for that. So I'll keep the automatic detection available. I'll click forward, and now you have to choose how much RAM you're gonna give to this system. So I would recommend giving Windows 11 between minimum of 4 and ideally 8 gigabytes of RAM. I'm gonna give it 8. Now, of course, this depends on how much RAM you have on your machine. Obviously, if you have an 8 gig RAM machine, you can't give it all 8. So in that case, go with 4. don't go higher than half the total amount of memory on your machine. Here I have 32 gigs of RAM, so I have a little bit to play with. We also can choose how many CPUs to give it. I have 16 here available, or rather 8 cores, 16 threads. I'm gonna give it 4, that should be more than enough. And now we'll need to create a disk for this virtual machine. Okay, now 40 gigabytes as suggested here is, in my opinion, a little bit small, especially if you're then going to install software. So I'd go with at least 60 gig for Windows 11 plus the software you also need to install with it. Click forward. We can give this a name. I'm going to call it Windows 11 Demo. But here's the important part. Don't just click finish. Make sure you click Customize Configuration before install, and then click Finish. So this will bring up this window here where we can set our options. The first thing we'll want to do from this Overview tab is change the firmware. You see by default it says BIOS. You'll want to choose the option that has sec boot in it. Okay, so make sure it's UEFI or UEFI. x86-64, and then the one that has the sec boot option. Now if you don't have the sec boot option but you have some other UEFI option, choose that. But if you have this particular option, that's the one you will want. For chipset, you can leave it as is. Okay, so the rest of the settings should be pretty much normal. What you will want to do is go to boot options, and you'll need to select SATA CD-ROM 1 and press this up button to give it priority. That's so that we boot from the CD for the installation. And I'll click apply. Now we'll go to SATA CD-ROM 1, and you'll notice that that's already bound to that ISO that we configured. The rest of the options are pretty much nothing to write home about. I mean, they're pretty normal stuff. Now what we will need to also do is add an emulated Trusted Platform Module or TPM chip. Luckily this is supported, so we can click Add Hardware. And from the list of hardware here, we'll say TPM, and the defaults are fine. Okay, model, CRB, emulated, version 2. That's absolutely fine. We'll click Finish. Okay, and as you can see, that chip is added. Okay, so now we've made all the changes we need at this stage, so we'll go ahead and click Begin Installation. The virtual machine is created, and as you can see, we get this option, press any key to boot from CD. I pressed space to boot from the supposed DVD that we are installing Windows 11 from. Now at this point, as you can see, it's going to be really, really small. Now what we can try and do is we can go here to View, Scale Display, Always. And as you can see, that makes it a little bit more visible. Okay, so I'm gonna try and take this as large as I can for the purposes of this video. And from here on, it's on pretty much a standard Windows install. So the language is English, time and currency format. I'm actually gonna change this to English Malta, which is where I'm at. And the keyboard layout is actually United States in my case. Obviously, you will need to change these settings depending on your stuff. And we'll click Next and Install Now. And setup is starting. Now, at this point, you'll need to enter your Windows product key. And that will also let Windows know what version of Windows you actually bought. Remember, if you have a Windows 10 product key, Windows 11 is basically something you can install without paying for it. Now, I do have a product key, but I've already used it to install a VM. So for now, I'll just say I don't have a product key, which means I'll have to choose which version of Windows I have, which in my case is this one, Windows 11 Pro. Okay, so if you're gonna put your product key in later, just make sure you're going to choose the right version of Windows in this screen. And I'll click Next. Okay, read and accept the software license agreement. Click Next. And then click Custom, Install Windows Only, since we're not upgrading anything here. Okay, you'll see that disk we created earlier with 60 gigs of space. Just click Next. And now the installation has begun, and we can just let this take its course. Okay, so Windows restarted my VM a couple of times. Now, one thing to note is that when you restart, you'll get that notice again. Press any key to boot from the CD or DVD. Now, it's important that you don't press any key at that point, since Windows has now been installed on this hard disk and we want to boot from the disk. Anyway, so now we'll choose our country. In my case, it's detected that I'm in Malta, so that's pretty cool. The keyboard is US in my case. Do I want to add a second layout? No. Now you will notice at this point that it says that we don't have an internet connection. Now that's absolutely fine. Okay, just click I don't have internet. And we'll say continue with limited setup. Don't worry about that, we'll be fixing this in a moment. Okay, now we'll enter our name. Okay. And we'll choose a password. And we are pretty much forced to choose a security question. So I'm just gonna fill these in, guys. Now we get the endless amount of questions from Microsoft. Okay, let Microsoft and apps use your location, etc, etc. So typically I just disable all of these, especially since this is just a VM. Okay, I'm not gonna lose it. But obviously these are up to you.
A few moments later.
And here we are. Windows 11 has now booted. And as far as the Windows 11 installation is concerned, we are now complete. Now, there are, however, a few things we'll need to do to improve our experience. So first of all, you'll notice the resolution is really low. And you will, however, notice that we do have internet access. So despite during setup, the installer telling us that there was no internet, we do actually have internet. In fact, if I open Microsoft Edge and get past this initial nag screen that Microsoft insists on adding to its browser, you will see that we do actually have an internet connection. Okay, which is great for the next step. So in the Microsoft Edge browser, you'll need to go to the address where you can download the guest tools. The link is down in the video description. And you will see that the latest version of the guest tools, in my case, was released on the 13th of January 2022. Okay, depending on when you watch this video, obviously there will be a more recent version. So I'm just gonna download these and open the file. I'll read and agree to the license terms. And just next, finish the setup. Okay, so again, it opens up another setup program. You can see that the list of tools that are gonna be installed are all here. That's fine. Now, during installation, what should happen is that you'll notice your screen going blank for just a second and then coming back at a better resolution. That means that the graphics driver was successfully installed. Okay, so now you will notice that if I right click on the desktop and go to Display Settings, I can go here to Display Resolution, and now I can choose higher resolutions, for example, to 560 by 1440. Okay, now if I want a bit more of an immersive experience, I can go to View and go to Full Screen here, and you can see that I have a full screen display. That's working pretty well. Okay, so now how good is this VM? Well, it should have really good performance. What I'm going to do is actually go to YouTube. And I'm going to choose one of my videos and play it at 4K. And as you can see, the video is playing just fine here. Okay, now obviously 4K is a bit too much considering the resolution I have here, so maybe if I take it down to 1080p, yeah, you can see that that actually does work better. However, one thing you should note is that Virtual Machine Manager is very flexible. There are ways, for example, of passing your graphics card as an item used by Virtual Machine Manager, in which case you could actually play, full-on 3D games and obviously play YouTube videos at 4K and whatever else you want. So this is really just a starting point. We have a fully functional, fully working, nice-looking virtual machine, and from here, the sky's the limit as to what you do with it. As long as you follow the steps correctly, you should have a Windows 11 VM running on Linux in no time. And whilst performance will vary on the amount of resources your computer has, it's going to be pretty much hitting the limit of what your computer can do. Personally, I've been using this solution whenever I need to use Windows for a few months now, and have never had any problems with it. So I really hope you found this video helpful and useful. And if you have, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel, Tech Guru. Your subscription in particular really helps to keep me motivated in a big way. Also, if you would like to support me financially, please consider joining the awesome people on screen now and supporting me on Patreon. Patrons get their name in the credits, early access to videos, a patron-only Telegram channel, and more perks from time to time. I would certainly appreciate your support. Finally, if you want to watch these videos on an open platform, check out Odyssey, where you can find mine and thousands of other videos for your consumption pleasure. Well, that's all for today, and as always, thanks for watching.